Welcome to the Do More podcast, where we share strategies and tips for improving your life in every aspect. Here's your host, John Farling.
All right, we're back, and today I feel like I'm kind of first on the scene here. We've got a newly financially, I guess you call it independent, good friend of mine that just left his 9-to-5 as of yesterday. So today, when we're recording this, not the day of airing this show, but day of recording, this is his first day of not having a 9-to-5. So definitely want to celebrate that during the show. But have my friend Brendan Daly on. He is in self-storage, but Brendan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, John. Happy to be here. For, I guess, first podcast interview, I kind of was holding off on doing this for a while. You wanted me to do this for a while, but I was like, oh, no, not until I'm fully, on my own, not working for somebody else. So, yeah, here we are today, and your timing is impeccable. But, yeah, so Brendan Daly, originally from Rochester, New York. I got my Bills hat on here, so, go Bills. Currently live outside of Philadelphia in the Philly suburbs. Moved down here 5 years or so ago. Kind of got settled down, got married and bought a house here in the Philly suburbs. What else can I say? I got 4 storage facilities down in Alabama and Mississippi, so run those remotely. Looking to grow the business here now that I'm going full-time into the storage business.
That's awesome. So I obviously know quite a bit about you, but want to learn more. But I know that you did play some college football, and I like kind of starting there, unless there's stuff before that, but I like starting there. One, I just think it's interesting, especially college athletes actually, I think the past, 2 or 3 episodes, we had former college athletes on, and I'm just, I like athletics, and I enjoy those stories. So tell us a little bit about that. Where'd you go to school? Your college career? Yep. How'd that look?
Yeah. So, in high school, I played football and lacrosse. It was my 2 kind of main sports in high school. I was built more for football than lacrosse, although I enjoyed my lacrosse years. But my freshman year, I actually went out to Bentley College, which is outside of Boston in Waltham, Massachusetts. And that was a D2 school, and essentially walked on there because they didn't really recruit anywhere near where, I lived or anything like that. It was kind of most of the people in the New England area. But redshirted my freshman year, played offensive line. But that year, Bentley, we went to the Division II national semifinals. So it was a good team. Lots of good players. It was fun. It was kind of overwhelming, as a freshman coming on to do that. And then I ended up, after my freshman year, I transferred to Cornell. That's actually kind of where I wanted to go to high school, but I had this weird sort of guaranteed transfer as a sophomore admission. So I could go anywhere I wanted to as a freshman. I could have gone to a local community college and transferred in as long as I took certain credits, and played D-line there. And then I stopped, I guess it would have been the spring, after spring ball of sophomore year, I stopped. It's been a bit of a blur, I'm thinking. But, at that point, I knew I wasn't going to be going pro. But I actually was lining up against a guy who did get drafted in practice every day. So, and he ended up winning a couple of Super Bowls.
Who was that?
His name was Kevin Booth. He got drafted by the Raiders, and then ended up he was a right guard for the Giants when, with Eli, and when they won the 2 Super Bowls. So, definitely a challenge lining up against him every day in practice. But it was a good experience for while it lasted. But I knew at that time I had serious career ambitions to go work on Wall Street. And there was a track of athletes going into Wall Street, especially the sales and trading kind of side of things, which is where I focused on. But I felt like, it's super competitive to get those jobs coming out of school, even like a good school. I mean, Cornell was a good feeder school into some of the Wall Street firms and had some great opportunities because of that. But I knew I needed to kind of focus on academics and do some other stuff if I really wanted to kind of achieve that goal. So that's what I focused on. That's where I kind of hang up the cleats back then.
So was there any type of, and actually last couple episodes, we talked about this too, because I know I struggled myself. Was there any type of like identity shift or transition to where you struggled with quitting and you're like, well, I'm no longer a football player. Who am I now?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say when I was playing, I kind of had this certain level of pride. Like, there aren't that many people who on campus can get up and do this, right? Because we had, I guess it would have been like 7 a.m. lifts even in season. So, in college, getting up at 6, 6:30, whatever, get up. So you're in the weight room starting, at 7, do that, then go to class all day, then practice. I mean, there were some nights, like Monday nights, it was like film and all this stuff didn't start till later. So we wouldn't get off the field till like 11 o'clock at night. And then you're back into the gym at 7 a.m. the next morning. And trying to do a high academic load on top of that. So it was definitely like a sense of pride and like, outwork and hustle kind of grind mentality associated with that. And then, I ended up joining a fraternity as well. There was a lot of football. It was like kind of football and swimming mostly, along with some other guys who didn't play sports. But, I kind of felt a little bit like imposter once I was still kind of part of that group, but wasn't playing anymore. So there was some of that kind of maybe on the social side of things that I kind of was self-imposed more than anything. But then I kind of got involved in some investing clubs and, some other kind of student leadership opportunities and stuff. So found other ways to kind of quickly channel, where I want to focus things and maybe how I wanted to self-identify, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important you can't just stop something that you've been doing for a while and do nothing, which we'll probably talk a little bit about that, leaving your 9 to 5 too. But obviously you filled it with something else. So you said you wanted to work on Wall Street. How did those thoughts come about?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I graduated high school in 2003. So that was just post, .com boom. Growing up, my dad was a small business owner, had a construction company, but also was like very much like kind of the investing mindset. And so, in the morning at breakfast, like the TV was on in the background, he'd be having like the CNBC sort of channel on and kind of just piqued my interest with everything that was going on and just this whole other world of level of business, level of wealth, investing kind of mindset. And so just kind of, it's interesting how you kind of absorb that like every morning, and you're kind of very influenced as a teenager, but so that kind of always intrigued me. And so I kind of, and I think I even like read like Rich Dad Poor Dad in high school, even. I think, my parents gave it to me or something like that. Yeah. In which I didn't fully comprehend everything that was in the book at the time. But, I was attracted to like reading those kind of things and just kind of, learning more about that. So, yes, that was a goal, I guess, almost really kind of like senior high school. Like, it was like what college would best prepare me to be able to get, a job at one of these like prestigious Wall Street firms and kind of just set the path from there.
That's cool. So after college, how'd that shape up? Did you land on Wall Street?
Yeah, I did. So it kind of, the way like it typically works is, there are these like entry kind of analyst programs at all these firms, but they only recruit at certain schools, right? And so, Cornell is one of those schools that they would recruit from. So, had an advantage there, but it kind of starts actually your junior year with internships. So I got an internship at Lehman Brothers between my junior and senior year. So that was like an 8 or 10 week program in the summer. And then they literally gave me a job offer that summer before I even went back for senior year. So like,
Wow.
I knew that I had a very good high paying job lined up as, basically before my senior year started. And I had interviewed, and at the time I thought Lehman Brothers was like the best landing spot I could possibly be. I mean, there's a huge network of Cornell alums. I mean, there was, gosh, I think the company might have been like 20 or 30,000 people or something. And there were like several hundred Cornell alums. Like there was like, meetups and happy hours and stuff that like other folks would be part of, the alumni network. I think there might have been like 20 kids out of Cornell my year going there across different divisions and stuff. So huge support network to make that kind of transition. And, it was great. And like, so I didn't even try to apply anywhere else or do anything. Like I was just like, this is where I want to be. And then, so we can kind of get into what happened to Lehman Brothers, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I interviewed at all the other, like I was interviewed at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. I had an offer from JP Morgan to do an internship there on like their oil commodities trading desk. Looking back, who knows, where I might be if I had taken that path instead of the Lehman Brothers path. But yeah, it was wild, as a junior in high school, or not junior in college, they're flying you down for interviews. You're putting your suit on, going into these high-rise buildings, all this. I think it was like, you get the internship. I think they pay you like 10 grand, like back then, for the summer. I'm sure now it's more, in some cases they would like pay for your housing and all this. So, super fast track, kind of intense right out of the gate, lots of, learning, training, support kind of as your first career. So that was, really, a special kind of program to be a part of. But I kind of, even when I kind of got there on a full-time basis, I was like, I don't know if this is really, right for me. But it's kind of like one of those things where you just don't, it's like golden handcuff. It's super golden handcuffs there, right? Like, the earning potential is basically unlimited. So it's, highly appealing from that perspective.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit, because that's obviously like, I won't say it's basically a dream job for a lot of people, right? Like that is, I'm not saying I wanted to do that, but if I had the opportunity, I absolutely would have. How did you even land there? Is it just because you went to Cornell and then you took the right classes and you got in the right internship? How did all that fall into place to where you got that internship and you basically opened the door for yourself to prove yourself to them? Because most people can't even get that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of back then, right? So I graduated undergrad 2007. It's like the three hot tracks were, Wall Street, which is kind of investment banking, trading, that kind of thing, which leads itself to like, you spend a few years there, then some folks might go into like private equity or, work at a hedge fund or something, or maybe venture capital. The other kind of hot track was like consulting, right? So you work for like Bain or McKinsey or something like that and do strategy consulting. Plenty of folks who wanted to go be doctors or lawyers and do, that prestigious route. And then it was still too early in the tech scene. I mean, there weren't too many people going out to like, Facebook. Zuckerberg's basically the same age as me. So he was like building Facebook at Harvard at the time. But there wasn't really like, Google obviously existed, but I don't think there were like many people really going there. So it was really like New York City, finance consulting is kind of like the hot jobs everybody wanted to kind of like go after. And so to your question about how did I kind of put myself in the position to be able to like land this kind of role, I definitely played like the athletics part of it, because you got to stand out, right? Because you're talking about tons of super smart people. Like, these companies would come in, they come to an auditorium and give a presentation, and they might fly in like a dozen people from the company, fly up, like give a presentation about what the company does, what the internship program looks like. And there was probably at least 1,000 kids in this room, like of people who wanted this internship, right? I mean, because Cornell is like probably like 12, 13,000 undergrads, I think roughly. but yeah, these, like, everybody and their brother wanted one of these, at least definitely like an internship at a minimum, because it's like, super good experience, even if you were like going to do something completely different later on. But I don't know, like, just being personable. I mean, I definitely like networked with people, like asked the right questions, just try to like engage with people who showed up on campus. Um, at that time, I also got like a part-time bartending gig, and so, believe it or not, like, these alums who would come back, like, later on, they like show up at this like bar I would like intern at, because that's where I was working, because they would like hang out there, when they were in undergrad. So it was like, going back to their old stomping grounds. And I got plenty of business cards, like, as the bartender behind the bar, just kind of chatting up with them and stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, told my story. I mean, but it was a lot of prep. I mean, a lot of research into like, what are they looking for? A lot of interview prep of, what kind of questions going to be asked. Like, there were certain like guides and stuff out there for these kind of interview processes. So it was a lot of preparation. It was a lot of reach out. It was everything, right? And on top of like just having good academics and good resume, and presenting yourself in a professional manner. So it was, a lot of focus to make it happen, for sure.
Yeah. And as you're saying, how much of that was things just falling into place, or were you strategic with what you were doing?
No, I was definitely strategic about it. I mean, if I didn't like put effort, I wasn't going to like stand out and just like get one of these jobs. It wasn't going to be handed to me on a silver platter, right? Like, it was a serious, like, I took it very seriously to put myself in that position. And so, a lot of prep went into it, a lot of just talking to people who had recently graduated, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I remember like calling some of these guys, like, I'd get their card, like, I'd call them, like, I don't think many like juniors in college are like actually like calling, some of these people who they met at a networking event that work at this prestigious firm or whatever. Like, it just wasn't happening, but I was willing to do that and, go all in for it.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of lessons here, right? There's a ton of things that we can all take away from it. Most people listening to this probably aren't prepping to go to college or in college and trying to find their next job, but like, just the intentionality and the things that you did to get to where you wanted to go, right? You knew where you wanted to go. You
Yep.
put yourself out there, you're networking, you're reaching out to other people that were more experienced than you, and getting advice. Like, I think that's missing with most people in the world. When I say most, it's probably over 90%. People are just afraid to ask for advice,
Yeah.
and ask people what they think and how to do something. Like, people just don't do that for some reason.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think people are afraid to put themselves out there. I think, there's part of that. I think some of that can be a confidence thing. Maybe some ego, right? Like, they're afraid to look like a novice or something like that, or ask, feel like they're asking a dumb question or whatever. But everybody was there, right? And so, if somebody does sort of reject you in a weird way, I mean, that's their own problem, right? That's not a reflection on you. And so, but yeah, it's like, I think we kind of live in this world or society of like perfection, and social media, you only display something, which I'm not a social media poster by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, I think that definitely is maybe part of what holds people back. It's other people's opinions.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that and just thinking, like, when I was 20, 21, like, I wasn't asking other people for advice. I thought I knew everything, right? Especially at that age. That age, males, like, we all think we know everything. So no, that's awesome that you reach out to others, and I'm sure that's something that's carried over, in your life now, and we'll get there too. So Lehman Brothers, how'd that go? How long were you there? I know obviously you've transitioned since then.
Yeah.
What happened
Well,
there?
I mean, so yeah, so that was 2007. And they kind of had like this rotational interview thing. So you kind of get to basically I was in the sales and trading division, which means, could have meant like working on like mortgage bond trading, equities, like if you could just be like trading like millions of shares of Microsoft every day or whatever, could be like the oil and gold trading commodities. I ended up being on like an equity derivatives desk. And so it was a little bit different. I mean, it was challenging, something I knew nothing about. But the people I kind of talked to, some of the advice I got was like, well, if you can work in this desk, like you can do any of these other jobs on the floor, because it's more like one of the more complex ones. So I was like, all right, like there's some value there, I think, and some wisdom. But we actually, so I'll get to it quickly, but we would, a lot of like 50% of what we did was like creating these like esoteric structured notes is what they're called. And it's really for like high net worth individuals. They're like, it's usually like a bond and an equity piece combined. So it's this custom sort of payout note that's created. You could do all sorts of things with it, and like, but not many people know about it at all. It's really kind of reserved for like that ultra high net worth kind of client. And then the other part of it was hedging concentrated stock positions for like founders of companies or executives of companies. So, people might have like 90, 80, 90, 100% of their net worth in like a single stock, maybe because they found a company or whatever. And so there are ways for these folks to find liquidity in those with those shares and not actually sell them, right? So basically kind of taking custom loans against those positions, and we would kind of set up those sorts of transactions. But with Lehman Brothers, to date, it is the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Everybody who did business with us was actually an unsecured creditor of the firm. So these people who thought they were getting all this downside protection and having these structured investments became unsecured creditors. And so like bankruptcy proceedings, they tried to get whatever they could for, the money they had in there. I was like going around a layoffs in September 2008. And along with, I don't know, probably 4,000 or 5,000 other people that day. There were a couple rounds before that. I was kind of, obviously like the most junior person on the team. And so there were some people that were let go. They were a little bit more expensive than me. And then finally my number was called. But, it was wild. Like it was super stressful, like leading up to that. 'Cause first job out of college, like you didn't like understand the concept of people like either side of you being like let go and layoffs and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly like I got thrown into the fire of like doing stuff that like, somebody who's been there 10 years was doing, but because they were no longer there, I had to do it. And so, I'm like facilitating like $100 million trades and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I better not, miss the decimal place or whatever. So it was a wild ride for sure. But that happened, I don't know when I would have left or whatever, but that happened for me, I guess, not to me. And so, set me on a completely different path in life after that happened.
So, and I want to hit on what you just said. You said it happened for you and not to you. If you want to explain that, you can. I just want to. I love that saying, because I don't think many people think like that. We're not taught to think like that.
Yeah, and trust me, like I didn't think about that back then. Only since a lot of coaching, within the last probably 4 or 5 years, where I've kind of started to really understand what that even means. But yeah, at the time, like it was like, oh, poor me, like can't believe this happened. Like now what? And like, it's amidst the financial crisis. Like there's no way I'm getting another job in Wall Street and finance is what I want to do, all this kind of stuff. Right. And so I was kind of playing the victim of the circumstances. That's kind of, it happened to you, right? This situation happened to me, like, and now it's impacting me in this way. looking back on it, it happened for me, right? It happened for a reason. It changed my life trajectory of where I was going to go. I mean, I could still be living in New York City in some small apartment and be miserable in the concrete jungle. So I knew it wasn't right for me in the long term. And so that was probably good to find, have that exit sooner than later. I still have friends I graduated with, and all that who are still working there. And I think some are happy, some are not. But, I think it took me a little while it definitely took me years to if I'm being honest, to really get over that kind of life experience. But, I'm happy with where I'm at now. So.
Yeah. So yeah, you were basically fresh out of college and thrown into the Great Recession, which I'm a few years older than you, but I was kind of in construction and was somewhat I knew what was going on, but it didn't really impact me, at least financially, because I wasn't making anything at the time. I was, basically just a few years out of college and didn't affect me that much. So what did you do after that? And you just obviously just said it affected you for a few years, but what'd you do after leaving there?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think it affected me financially, sure. I mean, I had, the thing you just had a couple of roommates in New York City, an apartment, but living in Manhattan. So, I mean, even back then, I think it's funny. I think it was a big number, but it was, I don't know, maybe $1,600-1,800 a month in rent just for my bedroom share. But yeah, I mean, and I was supposed to actually get a little bit of a severance. And then after after I got laid off, within the week, the firm went bankrupt. So the severance went away. And so I was immediately all right, filing for unemployment. So it was wild, right? As, I don't know, whatever, 22-year-old, 23, maybe I was, I don't know. Going from, thinking you're, high flyer on Wall Street to signing up for unemployment. And that I think was maybe enough to cover the rent or something, but that wasn't going to cover anything else. Yeah. And, like I said, I knew I wasn't getting a job in finance. Nobody was hiring, everybody was firing. And so I was I don't know what's next. So I kind of, I went back up to Rochester. I had my lease for another 10 months, basically. But was kind of going back and forth between New York and Rochester just because, I didn't know what to do, and, just Gotham, right? Nothing to do, just kind of there in your apartment. My roommates were shocked by it, although I think one of my roommates, a few months later, he got let go too. He was at Bank of America. So it was just a bloodbath for people that were in that industry at that time. So eventually I had nothing to do. I was bored. So I was I went back home, started working for my dad's construction company for a while. So, I went from wearing suit and tie, and walking to work in Manhattan every day to putting on the boots, living at home, going to climb up on the scaffolding. And so that was a rude awakening, but eventually I decided, I should just hide in grad school for a couple of years. And so I went and got my MBA at the University of Rochester, applied there, got in, and just kind of did full-time MBA for 2 years. While the economy turned around and I figured out what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And before we get to the next part, how much of, because obviously you're in self-storage, how much of getting in self-storage and kind of creating your own destiny was probably from your experience losing your position at Lehman Brothers?
Yeah, probably a lot of it. I think, I was kind of, wired that way from a very young age, just kind of seeing my dad's business and his dad had construction, but his parents came over from Ireland, so they immigrated to the US. So kind of had a couple of generations of having a small contracting business, and just kind of, and my mom was a school teacher, so kind of saw both sides a little bit. But the corporate sort of big corporation thing was a very foreign concept to me. But it just didn't fit kind of, how I'm wired, I think, and it's kind of surprising I lasted as long as I did in that world, but here we are. So I think but I always had like business idea, things, even like, I don't know at what age I kind of started like coming up with like little ideas, but nothing that was really too sustainable necessarily. But
Yeah. So you've always had that entrepreneurship mindset. So after you got your MBA, I know, what you've just done, recently where you just quit your 9 to 5. I want to somewhat fast forward so we can talk that a little bit about storage too. So I guess talk to us where you just left and what you were doing, because you were there for quite a while, right?
Yeah. I mean, this company I was with, it was essentially a digital marketing company that generates leads for a lot of home service related companies. So roofing, HVAC, plumbing, kind of all the pest control, all that kind of stuff. I would work with some like the national brands and the agencies we would work with. But I was there over 10 years, 12 years, I think. I basically started there when it was essentially pre-revenue. So it was like, a startup. And so, that entrepreneur bug definitely was like, all right, like I know I don't want the big corporate thing, right? Like when I was kind of transitioning, figure out what's next. So I thought back then I wanted to like do that, like, create an idea, raise VC money, all this stuff. Didn't really have the tech background to do that. But I have kind of like fair enough ideas on like the product side of things. But figured, all right, like I'll give this a shot and join this. And so, grew that, helped grow the company. So definitely got that like small startup experience in a way. I think if I was basically hired remote, which, I know that's relatively common now, though, like the trend is trying to go back away from that a little bit. But if I wasn't remote, I don't know if I would have, I don't think there's any way I would have stayed as long as I did. I don't think I could just drive, like go into an office every day, and do that. But I had just enough sort of flexibility and freedom working from home every day that kind of fit my personality a lot better.
And that and it's funny because just thinking about we have somewhat, and I think entrepreneurs in general have somewhat similar mindsets to where, I mean, I was in a lot of different aspects, but basically outside sales, and I had a bunch of freedom, flexibility. I could go in the office in the morning for a half hour and leave for the rest of the day, and didn't really matter. If I got my stuff done, my sales were there, it didn't matter. And like what you said, if I didn't have that freedom and flexibility, I wouldn't have lasted that long. So do you think that also kept you there longer than what you would have, I don't want to say would have liked, but would have thought you would have been there for?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think, also thought that like maybe we'd sell the company too and like get some equity kind of potential with that, which still could happen. But when I first joined, I thought it might be kind of this, maybe 5-year kind of exit thing or whatever. And, you have no way to predict if that will ever happen. But I think, if I didn't have that flexibility, for sure, I definitely wouldn't have stayed. I also, like, not just at this company, but the company prior, like I would be the person that would kind of go and travel to see, customers all over the country, partners all over the country. So, and like go to trade shows sometimes. So I think, early on in my career, like as far as that goes, like just being able to kind of travel all these cities I'd never been to, do that kind of thing was very appealing. I think that's gotten a little bit old. But yeah, I mean, like there were some perks to it for sure that, kept me there for longer than I probably would have in a different situation.
Sure. So you have 4 storage facilities. When did you get into storage and why? What was the main driver behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always knew I wanted to get into real estate of some form. Like I said, I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in high school. I know I did. Um, and I probably should like pick it back up as an adult. Everybody talks about it, but
Mhm.
I think a few things. My dad having that construction company, we worked on a lot of. It was basically a combination of high-end custom residential homes, and then that was maybe 50% of the business. The other 50% was commercial, mostly like strip plazas, and a couple of developers in Rochester were putting up a ton of like flex space. So worked on a ton of those buildings. So kind of saw firsthand like the development process. Um, and just was always intrigued by, real estate in general. So fast forward, and some of the flexibility I had with the company, right? Like I lived in Florida for a few years. Companies like, sure, like if you want to live in Florida, that's fine. So I was living there, got my real estate license part-time. So I kind of did that for like a hot minute, but, that wasn't the right fit for me. Maybe I could do it on the commercial side, not the residential side, but kind of did a live-in flip on a foreclosed condo that was down there. So basically after that, when I completed that, I suddenly started kind of researching, real estate investing online. Didn't think about it up until that point to like do a search, and then classic, found Bigger Pockets, all this stuff. Listen to, was constantly listening to Bigger Pockets, and not all the guests would kind of say it, but some of the ones that I really resonated with that like were really kind of doing things at a quick pace said, skip residential, go straight to commercial. And so I was like, okay, we'll go on that route. And so at that point, I thought it was like apartments. I was going to either do apartments or mobile home parks. And self-storage wasn't on the radar, but then kind of by happen chance, walked into a RIA meeting that, Mr. Mike Wagner was hosting, a small meetup back when he ran a little bit of a RIA. Told him I was kind of interested in apartments and mobile home parks. He's like, well, you ever thought about storage? And I was like, not really, no. And so, got talking to him, became good friends with him. And storage had a lot of the characteristics that were appealing in the multifamily and the mobile home park, but just nobody living there. Although I do have an apartment at one of my facilities, and I wish I didn't, but so that was, gosh, I'm trying to think of the year now. I think I maybe ran into him maybe for the first time, like 2018 or something. Got the first one under contract late 2019, closed right at the beginning of 2020, which obviously was an interesting time to like be getting into the storage business with the COVID lockdowns and all that. But yeah, so got that one in Alabama. Had never stepped foot in the state of Alabama up until that point. Didn't know anything about the state. But I said, you know what? I'm part of this group where other people are buying out of state and managing remotely. So if they can do it, I can do it too. Had some good success on that first one. Bought like kind of a second annex there. I don't know, a couple of years later, acquired another one in Alabama, one in Mississippi. And so that's where we're at today. And looking to grow more now that I'm in it full time. I think I was kind of bumping up to my capacity a little bit with you juggling all these different things. And so there's just kind of time to transition into focusing on it full time.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, today, the day of recording is your first full day as a full-time self-storage investor, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go back to identity. So you're probably still a little new into the transition, but obviously I know that it took a little while for you to, you had to have some things line up in order to leave your 9 to 5, right? Do you think identity played a part of that?
No, not really. I mean, for me personally, I know for some folks it definitely would. I wasn't really ever tying my identity to, I think back, when I was on Wall Street for sure. I mean, there was like, I liked like, there's definitely an ego thing of like talking about which firm you worked for, which if you were in those circles, like, okay, like Lehman Brothers was like respected, right? So there was some ego around that and some identity of working there and all this. And so I've definitely had that identity play, like going to Cornell, like all that stuff, right? Like, I think if somebody works at a branded company, right, like so that might be a certain part of their identity. But for where I was at most recently, that definitely didn't play into things. I think it was just more of like, when the timing made the most sense to make the transition.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So today's day one. How are you feeling right now? 6 hours into your storage journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surreal. I'm just different routine. I don't know, it's actually like no routine yet. Today, just kind of trying to enjoy the day. No, you texted me at 9:30. Hey, you want to do this? So it's like, okay, sure. That's my big appointment for the day. That and taking the new puppy to the vet later.
Busy day.
Yeah, getting a lot done. Making sure, it's the first of the month, so making sure the people pay their rent. That'll be, that's a little important. But yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. I think it's been in certain circles, right? The circles I've kind of been in for a little while that you're obviously a part of, like there's this putting the like leaving the W-2 on a pedestal, right? And like, I think that can be healthy. I think it can also be dangerous because, everybody has to figure out what timing makes the most sense for them. And there can be a peer pressure in both directions on that decision. So I think it was just the right time for me, right now. But I feel relieved that decision is behind me. I think that I put a lot of kind of mental angst into it, and like, I guess, mental warfare, like, when are we going to do this, all this kind of stuff, right? And like all this internal talk of making the transition. But now, I'm just excited to have that behind me and looking forward to growing the business.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that too. You made a good point that joining some of these masterminds and groups, especially in real estate investing, there's going to be, if you have a 9-to-5 and you're getting into these groups, there's going to be pressure for you to leave your job, especially if you say it one time or even hint at it, there's going to be pressure. So it's, if you're thinking about getting in one, like, know that going in, I'm probably going to get, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Some people need push, some people don't. Right. We can't all be entrepreneurs or else there'd be no employees. Right. We need employees to make the world go round. Some people are better at being entrepreneurs than others. Some people are better at being employees than others. There's no right or wrong, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's a really good point. So
and you can do the hybrid thing. Like, I mean, I kind of did that, right? It was kind of a side business, side investing thing, right? Like, there are plenty of very successful investors who, slowly, steadily, over 10, 20 years, build up a nice portfolio where it spits off some additional extra cash flow. It's an extra sense of security. And like, when they are quote unquote ready to retire, like, they can basically do whatever they want because they've been diligent with their investing and they chose to, take an alternative path. So, I know of some folks who have gone that path and, didn't regret a single thing, about going down that way either. So, it's not like you have to be one specific way to kind of build your investing journey.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So now with this time on your hands, where, and maybe you've thought this out, maybe you haven't, but where do you think your focus is going to be in your storage business and what's going to change?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple like operational things I want to like kind of dig in on. But really the focus, at least for the next 6-12 months, is just going to be on acquisitions, direct to seller acquisitions, cold calling, a lot of direct mail. I think that's where the best opportunities are if you're confident in kind of doing that. So that's where I'm definitely going to be spending most of my time here going forward.
Yeah. How much time do you think you've spent in the past year in that department?
not much. I'd probably be a lot further along, and that, and for, that's a weird, again, that's kind of a careful how you position that, right? I am where I am, but like, I think I didn't put much. It was not like a systematic approach. It was not like carving out specific time blocks or anything like that. I just really wasn't able to do that, and so now it was very inconsistent. I think now it's about being consistent, having the time blocks to, like, every day do this, figure out the system and the process around it, and just kind of chip away at it each day. But I might also kind of get some help on the cold call side of things as well, experiment with that, see how that goes. But really kind of, I think that focus is something that, some of our, you've talked about it before. Others have talked about just how if you're focused on one thing, like, you can go a lot further, a lot faster than trying to juggle several different things at the same time. So
yeah,
it will be a case study in that, hopefully the next 12 months, to see what happens.
Well, it's tough too, because it's, as you scale, and I'm sure you've got 4 facilities. I'm sure there's at least one of those facilities that doesn't have your full attention. And especially being remote, it's a little bit different. I've basically been running mine remote for the most part for the past couple of years. But there's definitely, like, I know at my sites, I would love to put some flowers or at least landscaping around our signs. Like, there's little things that could, like, curb appeal, but there's little things, not just that, but other things that are being neglected, because as you scale, they just kind of go by the wayside. So where do you think your slack will pick up in those areas now that you have this you can do this full time, other than what you said, operations, but are there sites that you have that have been somewhat neglected because of that?
Yeah, I think it's also maybe a combination of, like, holding, my field reps boots on the ground, a little bit more accountable. I think, because I wasn't, like, 100% focused on, the business, right? Because I had other things kind of I had to tend to, obviously, with my W-2. There's no more excuses for, like, letting stuff slide or kind of not being, just kind of a little bit more higher expectations of sort of how we're going to manage things going forward. But like you were kind of saying, like, I don't know what you've got, like 10, 11 or 12. I don't know where you're at, something 20. I don't know where you're at.
Somewhere around
But
there.
I wonder, like, is there a size for you? Like, is there a certain number of properties where it's like, there's, like, I think there's this critical mass, right, of, like, revenue and cash flow, but then, like you said, there's kind of like this other side of it of operational oversight and headaches, and what's kind of fallen through the wayside of, like, I don't know what the optimal size portfolio sort of looks like from both a economic but also a operational efficiency standpoint. Because there are, like, there's a lot that goes in. Storage is definitely not a passive investment. I think it can be systematized pretty well, but that there's a lot of moving parts between just the rent moving in and out. There's a whole digital marketing or just marketing side, customer acquisition side that is, more unique than to this asset class in real estate than any other. You've got that, you've got your employees you got to manage, you've got different tech things you got to manage in the background. If you are on the acquisition side of things, that's something. Like, if you're raising money, that's another. You're talking about banks and brokers, like, that's a whole other part of it, right? So you can only do so many things at a certain, at one time. So I don't know if you've kind of gotten to a size where, like, you know what, like, this is too many locations to manage, like, need to consolidate or something like that. But I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on, optimal portfolio size.
Yeah, it's a good question. Really good point. Because actually, I think it was yesterday I was thinking about it. I'm like, if I only had one site, how great would that site look? How tuned in, finely tuned everything would be, operations, everything. But then you look on the other side is, what if you have that? We'll just say it's 5 sites, 4 sites, whatever. And that's all you have focused on. And maybe you're in, we'll say you're in a different market for each one, right? Which is kind of how I am. I'm in, I think, 6 different markets, and then I have multiple facilities in several markets. I'm so thankful that I am, because I've got one market that does great for 6 months. And I'm just starting to see the trend now as of like this year. And the other 6 months throughout the year, it's absolutely terrible. It's like, I need to sell these right now. In fact, they're for sale right now. But they're good sites, but I have better sites and I have better markets that I'm in. So I don't know if there's a great answer for that, because even if you've got one great facility that's like, maybe it's paid off and it's cash flowing more than you'll ever need. But then what if a competitor comes in right next to you and cuts their prices, and you're going to have people move out, your occupancy is going to drop. It's not going to look the same. And then you still have inflation. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a right answer. I think it's each person's different. But these are definitely things that obviously you think about. I think about, I think we all think about, is what number or size portfolio is ideal. And I don't know if there is one.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it comes down to like maybe your team too, right? Like,
yeah,
it can feel like one facility and having the wrong boots on the ground could be more than you want to deal with, right? But if you have 10 facilities, 10 pretty good folks on the ground, and a great sort of office ops manager, like it could be very efficient for you. So I think maybe that's the answer, kind of lies in the systems and the people you have in place. And investing in them, training in them, and kind of getting them up to speed. But I think I don't necessarily know, like, if I don't have like a specific number I want to get to or whatever, but because in real estate, the earnings are potentially unlimited. Mm-hmm. But I think you kind of get into the business, right, not thinking about that necessarily, but just about the freedom that you can find, not just from time. I mean, sure, there is some financial benefits, and you want to be able to enjoy the time that you have, but I don't know. I don't want to like kind of create some sort of monster that I feel like I'm working more than I've worked in anything else up to this point. And so I think it's a delicate balance of I'm not looking to kind of sit on a beach and do nothing, but I don't want to like just be completely self-absorbed and have no life and working 7 days a week in the thing either.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think most people that are in, I don't even want to say most, probably self-storage. Most people today that are getting self-storage are looking for that time freedom. I don't know if there's a lot of real estate investors in general, because I just joined a new group 6 months ago that I don't know how much time freedom most people in that group have. Maybe they do. I don't know most of them well enough, but a lot of them seem like they're working like round the clock. And while I do think, especially as entrepreneurs, you're kind of working around the clock, but it's more like, and I've heard this quote, it's not a hard 40 hours. You're not clocking in or clocking out, but it's a soft 80 to where you're constantly thinking about it.
Right.
But you still have your freedom. I don't know if a lot of real estate investors have that, but us as storage investors, we want to keep that freedom as much as we can.
Yeah, I think maybe we see it a little bit more in storage just because we know a fair number of folks who have kind of achieved that. I think, there's plenty of single family, I think, investors out there who found success. A lot of people don't broadcast what they do, right? Like, you have no idea, like, who owns every single building you drive by, right? Somebody owns that.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that own like little mini strip plazas and stuff that generate a lot of money every month, and no idea who the owner is and where they are or what they're doing. So, there's definitely some people out there who are loud about, their freedom. But I'd say the vast majority, it's like the silent majority of folks who are just kind of out there doing their thing.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah. And you said the people you can probably, and especially in storage, you can scale as much as you want to with the right people and systems, which it's easy to put the right systems in place. I'd add the right markets too, which I kind of hit on before. But if you're in the wrong market, and that could go a lot of different ways. That could be oversaturation. That could be, I know a couple friends, mutual friends that are in bad markets where they just have constant break-ins. Yeah. So no matter how good of people you have, like you're still gonna deal with that. Your expenses are gonna go up. You're gonna hear about it more. Your employees are eventually gonna get tired of that. So there's a lot of things at play there that it's hard to completely optimize it. But I think too is as you get older and you get in different spaces of your life, different phases of your life, that changes too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard if like, what I've purchased out of state, right? Like I had never been in Alabama or Mississippi before I went there to do due diligence trips, right? And you don't know all the local politics that might be going on, right? Yep. You're not going to, I think the crime thing is, my eyes have been open to that. And so like trying to figure out how to, measure that kind of a little bit more, but you're the outside, a Yankee coming in down, from up north coming down into, small town in the South, like you might not be welcome, but you don't necessarily know that, right, for a long time. So you're definitely taking some risk when you're kind of going to a new place you don't know. But, if you only invest in your backyard, like you're just so limited as well. But, I think there's opportunities in anything, if you're willing to look hard enough and you're willing to be patient long enough.
Yep, for sure. Well, I'd love to keep this conversation going, and maybe we can get you back on a second show at some point.
I got nothing else to do now, so you want me to come back tomorrow? I can.
Oh yeah, you've got another 3 hours here available. So I do want to ask a couple kind of common questions I ask each episode. What's one thing that you do better than everybody else?
I'm a modest guy. I don't think I'm better than anybody else at anything.
There's something, I guarantee, or a few things.
I don't know. I mean, when it comes to like the marketing side of the storage business, I think I'm pretty dialed into that. But am I better than anybody else? I don't know. I mean, I think I'm good at it, but so I understand the tech side of things. I understand the marketing of the business. And so that is a huge piece of the business. And it will only become more so in the future. So staying on top of that and, deploying the latest strategies and systems, I think, I'll be on the leading edge of that.
Yeah. No, and that's a really good point that, marketing it's obviously has changed and changing, but it's either a strength or weakness for your storage business.
Yeah. I mean, it's right in 2019, 2020, like, the number of locations that didn't have a website, like, is probably like half, even 4 years later. Right. So like, there's been like, that was the initial thing, like, okay, fine, facilities don't have websites. Well, that's kind of gone away a little bit. Right. And so now it's like, more bigger players are going into smaller markets. So it's becoming more competitive, right, online. And so you need to stay at the forefront of that, and have the wherewithal to kind of dig deep when it's not working and figure out what's going on.
Yep, for sure. And I don't want to answer your question, but you did say you're modest. So I'm going to give you another answer. And I think you're a very, well, I know you're a very intentional person. Your story about just getting the Lehman Brothers, like, that's unreal. Like you kind of, I mean, you are a modest person, but you in ways kind of glossed over what that was and how big of an accomplishment that is. Like, that's absolutely insane. I don't know if, 7 degrees of separation, if I could find another person in my network that has had an opportunity like that. So that's absolutely insane. And another example, and if you want me to cut this out, edit it, I can. But another example is your now wife, we were together. You and I were at a mastermind. What was that? Probably 3 years ago. And you had this list of what you were looking at in a female.
Yeah.
And you literally met the girl, what, months afterwards? Who's now your wife?
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. That concept kind of came to me from another coach I have. But yeah, being definitely about being intentional, right? And sort of putting down on paper what you're looking for helps you gain a lot of clarity. And so, that's probably about 3 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm coming up on 2 years. We just bought this house. So I've been married a year and a half. So things kind of, in addition to buying some of that storage and all that, like, got married, got engaged, bought a house. Like there's been a lot of life stuff kind of going on in parallel. And so yeah, I mean, it's, I hadn't thought about that in a little bit, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I still think about like, that was absolutely I don't remember the list you had, 20, 50 things. I have no idea. But you literally found, I think it was 6 months later when we all met up again. You're like, yep, I got a girlfriend. We're like, what?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if she did or not, but I'm guessing she probably hits most things on that list, which is insane. Like looking back to how I found my wife, and I'm super grateful, but that is not how I found my wife.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember like asking like, oh yeah, like what kind of things would you put on a list? Like if you were writing one, everybody was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that was crazy.
Yeah.
So last question, where next for you? Especially this is day one, full-time self-storage investor. This may be a little blurry, but my guess is knowing you probably know what's next for you.
Well, I'm going to a conference on Monday. So, with some other storage owners and real estate investors. But so I guess that's kind of a good way to kick it off. But when I get back from that, it's going to be head down into acquisitions, building out that system. And I mean, I do have some leads that I just the last month haven't had the opportunity to follow up on. So, there's some immediate opportunities I can follow up on. I'm also probably going to look to maybe sell one or two locations here this year and just kind of rotate, just kind of keep things moving. So trying to set those up, get ready for sale, and hopefully 1031 if timing works out. If not, still kind of just sell and redeploy.
That's awesome. Where can people find you if they want to reach out, questions, or just want to network with you? Or not want people to reach out? Completely fine.
No, I mean, you can, I'm on all the socials. I don't have much of a presence on all the socials, but, the company website. So baldeaglestorage.com is the company. That might be the easiest thing to remember, baldeaglestorage.com, do the contact us. It'll go right directly to me. But yeah, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Like I'm connected with John or, anything like that. So, but yeah, that'd be the easiest way, I guess.
Cool. Well, again, appreciate you coming on. Super happy for you leaving your job, as long as you're happy, which I think you're happy.
Yeah. Thanks for pushing me along the way. You're one of the guys, and I didn't always want to necessarily hear it, but it was good to, if you don't have people you're around, right, like that are kind of trying to do something similar to where you're trying to go, it'd probably be a lot harder, and I probably wouldn't have made the choice, right? So definitely helps to have a band of brothers around you.
For sure. Absolutely. Cool. Well, again, appreciate you coming on. Happy for you. Super happy for you, and excited to see what you're going to do next. And we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for following, subscribing, and listening to this episode of the Do More podcast hosted by John Farling. To learn more or ask questions, go to l4investing.com.